Well done, everybody, for making it this far. So the session this afternoon, my name's Michelle Bald. I'm from the Department of Environment, Water and Natural Resources, and I'll be chairing this session today entitled The Bigger Picture in NRM Science. So the session we've got here this afternoon, I think, covers a nice broad range of some of those sort of big picture or future challenges, future sort of opportunities that exist in this space in NRM science. So I'm certainly looking forward very much to the talks we've got going this afternoon. And with no further ado, I'm going to hold a hand over. I'll keep holding onto this microphone, that's for sure. I'm going to hand over to Russell.
All right, so thank you. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to go back in history about 15 centuries, Michelle, so not so much future just yet. So, yeah, I'm going to start with the Romans and the Greeks and have a think about what they used to do. And they intertwined property, the religion and family really closely together. So the hearth in the family home or the palace had to be connected to the soil. You had to have the fire going 24 hours, 7. You had to have the fire, soil, religion, family. It was all intertwined. And the state, whatever it was back then, could not touch property. You could not touch family property, so if you had bad debts, you could maybe take other things, but you could not take the property. So it sort of sets up an interesting relationship that we find a thread through to the modern day, in our European setting anyway. So in the 10th century, things didn't really improve much either. We have these poor fellas, the serfs, who were bound to the land, had to produce crops for their lords. So we saw the rise of local lords, warlords, small little fiefs, kingdoms, and they were basically the rulers of that production over the land. Then in the 15th century, things started to change, especially in France, where there was starting to be a bit of a competition, a bit of tension between individuals and the state. And see documentation about legal systems and trying to get some rules of law in. And the creation of these sort of states basically created economic and legal implications for different parties. Land definitely became a commodity back then, and it was about achieving growth. So you see the 15th century map on the left, starting to divide landscape into land uses and people controlling those land uses. And on the right is more of a farm production system that incorporates timber production. So jump forward to 1800s in South Australia, not really much has changed. We've common laws come through. We don't really have any legal concept or protection of native veg, and it's really about exploitation, it's about clearance, it's about facilitating growth. So really from ancient Rome to modern day South Australia settlement, it's really the same kind of system we're working through. Then you look at some land clearance that starts to emerge. And there's a great book I found in our clean-out pile this week and it's done in a typewriter, incredible. No mistakes, it's fantastic. And this is a really great report. I reckon it's a foundational report in looking at veg management in the state. And you can see the stark clearances that were happening in a very short amount of time. And the great thing about this report, it brings economics into the picture. It's about choice. They talk about wheat production, cattle, other land uses, going, well, how do the land uses, how are they impacting on our native vegetation, our landscapes? They're trying to correlate the two, looking at commodity prices and clearance and making some direct correlations back in 1976. So in the 1980s, still got some improvements, but not great. We've got a planning system that helps a little bit, but it's still really rights of the individual. So there were starting to be some skirmishes about, well, we've got some state public good assets that we need to manage. It's not all about the rights of the individual. Several High Court cases occurred and I think the majority went towards the favour of the individual, which then started to raise a lot of questions within state governments. Well, this is not really going to help our bigger picture. So during this time, and this 1976 report actually talks about what is now the Native Vegetation Act. So it took that long to get to what we have now. But the real driver was this understanding of land systems, I believe. So, top right, huge salinisation issues, understanding of ecosystem flows and processes. Groundwater was a particular one, and trees can create rain, evaporation. So there's great understanding about land systems and how things work, help embodied some better legislation. So in 1991, the Native Vegetation Act was introduced, and I'm wondering now, is this actually a pretty big breaking point in the way we view the land? So the Native Veg Act breaks the legal system. The rights of the individual is no longer attached to the land. The state can actually influence what happens on that land. So I think it's a big disruption. It's not, obviously hasn't fixed everything, but it is, I think, a major turning point on how we can influence land systems and native vegetation in that land. So things like the Native Veg Council was established, an independent group overseeing the management. And the conservation became important in its own right. It wasn't just about production. So at the moment we're doing more reg reforms, what we call regulatory reforms, and we're really trying to get this balance between facilitating growth without losing our asset. I really liked Martine's talk yesterday about offsetting. For me, that's a really good tool to use. How do we offset better? We've got a lot of work there to do, but it's a really proactive way of getting things done. But what are our assets? So this is just a slide for agricultural regions only. It doesn't cover the pastoral lands. And so under National Parks and Wildlife Act, we have 1.7 million hectares. Under heritage agreements, under the Native Veg Act, so private land management, we pretty much have 1 million hectares now, and we're going to get to 1.3 pretty soon. So we see a situation here where conservation by private land individuals versus conservation done by the state is getting to a balance. So it's a big question about how we support both of those things, particularly private landholders. And the little asterisk in the right-hand corner about pastoral lands, we're about to put in about 20,000 hectares under a HA or heritage agreement coming up. So you can use this mechanism under big land systems or small land systems. So it's quite a powerful tool. Now my wobbly figures down the bottom, just to put some stuff in context, we have about 24 million hectares, 2 minutes, 24 million hectares in the ag region. So 3.4 million is protected. 3.4 million is native veg. And what's not protected is just under 700,000. So we basically have 700,000 hectares of native veg assets that don't have a formal protection apart from our Native Veg Act. So, and again, another question, what do we do with that asset in the future? So I better speed up. So towards the future, we've definitely decoupled labour and capital economies. So we actually need to get that back in sync again, value nature. Regulations can only do so much. We need actually other incentive means. And economics is about choice. It's not finance, it's not money. Economics is all about choice, scarcity and incentive. And obviously people will maximise their choice to get their gain. So, incentives. We have nothing in the Australian Constitution. Laws really do or can reinforce structural inequities, and we encourage trade-offs. It's a very complex system we're working under. So if we go back to the 15th century, we haven't, in my view, we haven't actually changed a lot. We've actually kept the same thing going over and over again and tweaking around the edges. We haven't fundamentally broken what we've got. So what do? It's more than science. It's definitely about incentives. And regulations only help to a point. Ecosystem service valuations have been interesting. Natural capital stuff's been great. No clear signs of adoption pathways. So I reckon business environmental law might be a really good area that we haven't looked at enough. Corporation law, tax law. So we used to give incentives to clear. You could take your costs for the year of clearing, get a tax break. Why can't we do that for rebeg? Why can't we do a tax incentive for rebeg? Supply chain and life cycle accounting. Don't do that well enough. And let's have a real serious look about product certification. It's about opening markets up. It's a point of difference. It's what South Australia could probably sell overseas. And beyond, well, it's not going to take, it is going to take a long time to shift. We don't capture values good, well, and we've got to make sure we incentivise over a scarce resource. So thank you, and remember that we do need to break this legal relationship we have with the land, because we're not going to get too much further without doing that, and it's going to take a lot of ideas and a lot of testing, and have a look at our website regarding our reforms we're doing, and get involved if you wish to. Thank you.
Thanks, Russell. I like your, you know, I don't think there's too many talks that have had such a long context history associated with the talk, so well done there. Has anyone got any questions specifically for Russell on this topic? I think everyone's in a post-lunch sleep. So I might ask one quickly if I can, before we sort of change over and move on to the next speaker, is so you talked about the, the Native Veg Act really marking that point in time, and you talked in the end about some of the things we need to do next. What do you see as the next really big reform or next break point, I think you called it, or that comes next?
Well, yeah. So I put up there, I think it's about the corporation law, our legal system, so how we can incentivise business, corporations to do things differently. So we need to put some energy into that and get a point of difference in there for them to adopt some things. That's, I think that's the missing link at the moment. Yep.
Any other? Oh, there's a question up the back there.
No, it's a good comment. I don't know how to tackle that one just now.
Just slip in. All right, we'll let you off the hook, I think, Russell.